So fáilseoir a bhuile leine agus is a seomad agus sé clach a haun gar riú bhí tuist isteach an seminar a hacin na seo. Professor Brendan Kane stage an Olhaid Connecticut a chain drasta fórlach rannsachadh an seoise Olhaid Ionnsachadh par a bheile gobad le padar a muchataí is Crisparan eadar-lìon coite Gàidhlig Thràth Nuadh-aimsireil. Fel sin ní about ceart. Yeah. So Professor Brendan Kane's a professor in the Department of History in the University of Connecticut, and he's widely published in areas of huge interest to Gaelic scholars and Gaelic scholars on historical topics, looking at relationship between Ireland and Europe, looking at ideas of the Renaissance, of political culture in Ireland. And as part of that, he's explored for many years the rich body of sources in early modern Gaelic, and we'll talk about that as we go through, I'm sure. And it's as a result of that he's been involved in leading this really groundbreaking project, which has opened up the early modern period of the language to scholars and students, and has used a really groundbreaking system of trying to make it available to people who might otherwise find it very difficult to access and engage with. So when we were talking about what he might come and talk about with us today, we felt that this might be a really interesting opportunity to just touch on the nature of that kind of source material and the doors it opens for potential collaborations between Irish scholars, Gaelic scholars, historians, literary and linguistic scholars, and so on. And I think I shouldn't try and predict anymore what Brendan's going to say to us about that, but rather hand over to him to lead us through. Fáilte, Brendan.
Thank you so much, Abby, not only for the really wonderful introduction, but also just handling all the arrangements. It's really great to be back here. I was here 2 weeks in August, working on my Gaelic, which I need to work a lot more on, so apologies. But thank you all for coming, and I'd also like to thank the University of Edinburgh and Leverhulme, who have allowed me to be here in Scotland for a year and 2 6-month blocks, and particularly Peter, who has already been mentioned, who is my colleague and collaborator and co-conspirator on a variety of things. So as Abby said, I'm going to talk. This is really a project that focuses on, or kind of comes out of Irish studies, kind of broadly construed. But I think it is a project, or we sort of think it's a project that has something to say for people working in early modern Gaelic, whether their focus is on Scotland or Ireland. So with that in mind, let's get going. One of the things about the site is it is a collaborative project. There are lots of people who are participants. There is a small group of that larger group that we refer to as the working group, the bheil. And so I just want to make sure right from the outset that that's acknowledged, that the slides that I'm showing, the work that I'm doing today, is not simply a reflection of the work that I've done, or the preparation that I've done, but the work of others, particularly these folks, Deirdre, Christina, Emmett, Emma, how did that get there? Emmett and Tom. Sorry, Emmett. Let's move on. Yeah, that's kind of bonkers. How about that? And now it won't move. It's on. There we are. All right. So, so what I'll do in the next, I think about a half an hour, and there's going to be a bit of a breathless rush through a lot of the stuff, but the idea was to kind of give as much as I can about the project, what it does, who's involved, what we're hoping to do, in the hope that some things might land with the different people, and you could either follow up with questions now or later. So I'll give a quick bit of background to the project itself. We'll quick run through the site. Some of you are familiar with it, others not. Give you a little bit of a preview of the next feature that we're hoping to launch soon, although we've been saying that for a little while. So Soon is always a little over the horizon, but nevertheless, we'll show it to you. And then I thought I'd finish up by thinking about some of, in our experience, again, collectively, our experience, some of the benefits and challenges going digital, and then some concluding thoughts. So let me start with part one. Again, just keeping an eye on the time. Why did we start the thing that ended up being leibh? What is it and what are its goals? All right. So I'm trained as an historian, right? I've never done a formal class in Nuadh-aimsireil, Bardic poetry, Gaelic skull, any of these sorts of things. I did a master's in Galway, but I did a PhD back in the US, just working with historians. So I spent a lot of time, and I'm going to get that slide off quickly because I don't want people to see like my initial kind of terror at trying to figure out what in God's name was happening. But this experience, right? So as we thought about the thing that would become leibh, really the beginning was, how do you make these materials available to people who are working in adjacent fields, right? So as an historian, so it's just thinking about the scholarly perspective, I'm somebody working in 16th and 17th century English-Irish history, as Abby has already described. I'm working on Latin, I'm working on French. I know there are these Irish language documents out there. How do I learn them, right? So how do I learn them, especially if I'm not in Ireland or in the UK? All right, so there's a scholarly perspective, but there is also a broader cultural perspective. And so this is, I don't need to pitch this to all of you, but this is one of the ways in which I've pitched it to various sort of funding agencies and administrators over the years, is if you think about Old Irish, their materials for learning it, Modern Irish, their materials, and obviously you can speak to people, but that period in the middle from about 1200, 1650 is just absent, right? So there's no dedicated dictionary, there's no practical function, sort of working grammar, and there's no guidebook how to do it. So one of the things I tell people is like, okay, imagine English language cultural discourse if you had no access to Hamlet, right? The whole Shakespearean world gone. And so I say, so imagine if you picked up Hamlet and looked like that, right? And so this is lorem ipsum, which is just the kind of faux Latin thing that you sort of feel stuff. Or since I'm American, to take an American perspective, and as someone, as Abby kindly noted, I'm interested in things like political thought, state formation. So thinking in American context, what would political discourse look like if you didn't have access to the Federalist Papers, right? And if you open it up and they look like that to you, especially even pixelated and bad like that. Now imagine the Irish setting, if you picked up a piece of prose, right? And and this even is published, Three Big by Kane, and it looked like, pick whichever one you want, or to take a sort of poetic contemporary, poems of Taic, Higgin, and Eleanor Knott hadn't gotten there to help you first, right? 500 years of just absolute mystery, right? And that has real effect on contemporary understandings of culture, of politics, of society, and the like. So we thought we'd try to do something to sort of help the situation. And doing that, we thought about a lot of things, but there were a couple of guiding concerns as we started pondering it. One was how to learn the language in the absence of teaching materials. So again, Old Irish and Modern Irish as our examples. And again, thinking about people who are in Brazil or Oklahoma or Tokyo or whatever it happens to be, right? So how do you help people learn this iteration of the language at a distance? But then we were also thinking about the outcomes side of things. And what we wanted, obviously, was to have broader accessibility to the language in that period. But, and this is really key, what we wanted more people reading the language. We're not in the business of providing translations. Like, that's not the world in which we wish to live, right? We want people arguing about their translations and ideally doing it in the darkened language. So it's kind of what you were saying before, right? So how to meet those guiding concerns? The initial thing was to make some digital version of those three basic required materials, or reference grammar, dedicated glossary, and a word-by-word analysis of text selections. So sort of that thing that I had, the picture from Keating and me scribbling all over it. And for many people who've worked on, I'm sure there are people in this room or in the Zoom room who've had this experience of going and photocopying the grammars from texts and photographing the grammars from early modern Irish texts, from the Dublin Institute or Irish Text Society, and then putting them in the 3-ring binder. And in fact, the first name of what became leabhar was My 3-ring Binder. So it was sort of like the digital 3-ring binder of those materials. So secondly, we had a pedagogical sort of theory to this, which was we wanted to do these breakdowns word by word, but if we went to somebody who was a specialist and said, hey, could you take a selection of text and could you break it down word by word? They could do it, it would be accurate. But they may not see the consequences, they may not remember the consequences they had when they started. So the idea was we would always have sort of 2 types of people on any text. We'd have people who are kind of at an intermediate sort of ish stage to have a first run through, and then we'd have an expert run through it and the first person's version of it, so they could say, oh, wow, yeah, I hadn't thought about that part as being particularly tricky. Let's take a moment to think about that, right? I'll tell you how that worked out. And then finally, to make the materials freely available. All right, so the thing that eventually became leabhar has a couple projects. One of them is making early modern Irish studies Irish, which is, coming from an Irish English historical background. It is a curious, everybody here knows this. It's an interesting phenomenon that you have people working on this period who don't have the language, can't read the sources. And, as we've heard many times, how could you be a French scholar? How could you be a, whatever it is, scholar without the language? And I'm obviously sympathetic to that. But on the other hand, I'm also sympathetic to people who are interested in the period, but don't have the access. Right, so we're trying. So in a way, there's a polemical thing. It's like, well, now if we help you be able to learn the language, then you don't have the excuse. So get on with business. There is the broadly cultural. Like we are really interested in the broader sort of Irish reading and speaking, Gaelic speaking world. So we want more people to move from Lorem Ipsum to Caton, or O'Higgins. We're interested in network creation, right? So people who are working globally on these materials to get to know one another, know who each other are. There's also a digital humanities element to this too, which is about collaboration first. So much of humanities work is done in solitude. It's done by individuals. Then you might work with somebody else. But this is very much about, kind of a lab. And I at least sort of resist the sort of, easy analogy to, the way in which, say, scientific articles are written, but nevertheless, I think heuristically it's helpful to at least think about. We could certainly talk about that. In doing so, we wanted the site to be a kind of advocacy effort for the language and increase the number of readers. Obviously, advocacy for the scholars who work in the language, right? Who, especially, in places where there aren't departments, for the study of the language and its sources, right? A place where like these folks can provide a greater context for what they do for their colleagues, administrators, and the like, and also to be an ally to the wonderful organizations and projects that have led publication in this field. And again, this is very Irish-centered stuff. So DIAS, the School of Celtic Studies, Irish Text Society, the Royal Irish Academy, Irish Script on Screen, and the rest. So these are some of the things. All right, so that's part one. I'm now going to go to here. So this is the site, and we started this absolutely on a shoestring. Like
We need to just get that into the Zoom.
Oh,
Yeah. You could ask Zoom.
oh, sorry,
Yeah.
into the share.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's good.
No, she just agus.
Yeah, shouldn't count. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, all right, so we started this absolutely on a shoestring. It was a seed grant of $4,000 that just went to an MFA student, Andrew Bacon, who was amazing, to help us write some code. And so it started out with this sort of IKEA look, and just over time we kind of liked it. And a couple of times we thought about changing it. People were like, no, that's part of the charm. So when you come here, right, these are the various pages, right? So as I said, there are annotated texts, glossary of words, a workable grammar, and then we developed a paleography course. So you can learn a little bit about About it, obviously, a little bit of history. And this is sort of the key spot. So you can come in and we try to have, the idea is to have short selections of pieces. And the idea being that you can start to see how the language works. And if you read a piece of, say, this poem, right, then you can try the next quatrain yourself. Right? And so on and so forth. Now, that said, we did start with a full-on poem. And we picked Brina O'Rourke, or Dannon, because it's actually a full-on poem, very short, quite famous. And so when you come here, as I said, we always want to be an ally to publishers. So the source, where did we get it from? You can go here and you can get information about the author or editor, about the press, and you can go straight to the site and buy it. And it also here tells you what that particular book gave to the glossary. Okay? So you can learn about the folks. Owen is in the about, and so we'll visit our friend Emma, who I suppose I should be calling Emmett. That's the way the day is working. He'll never let me live this down. This is a really bad day. All right. But again, getting just greater awareness to the people who work in the field, right? And giving them credit for the work they do, a description of the genre or form, and then access to, there it is, look at that, a full-on bardic poem, Brina O'Rourke, or Dannon. Yeah, Lower Wooka, Shinny to do. All right, so the way that it's set up is there are 3 little tabs, and this is the text down here. And when you start out, you have a thing called the general guide, which is just a little bit of background on the text, right? And then when you hover over it, there are 2 boxes. The yellow one is for semantic units. So when we first started doing it, we were focused on word by word. So like, oh, row, what is it? Oh, it's a noun. What is its form? It's a nominative singular. What is it doing here? Blah, 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 blah. And then one of our friends, one of the members of the group, he said, you might want to do semantic units too, like especially with bardic poetry, because it's like, oh, that's such a good idea, right? So you can go to, well, since that's there, or, go up to this one, right? So yeah, you get a little bit of information. So that's nice. Now, if you're curious about this word, preposition, like, oh, there it is. I'd like to know more about it. It'll take you straight to the glossary. There's the glossary. You can open it up. And so you can see all these entries. I'll describe in a moment why they look like this, but we're also linked with ùidh, so you can look for ùidh. Not every word, we're kind of slowly doing it, but if you decide you need more information about egg, you're really into it, you can hit here and you can go to the grammar, which has some more information about egg. So the idea is to try to keep these sort of internally connected to the best that we can. If you go back here, as I said, we always want to have people who are experts and people who are less expert, and so that we could identify the tricky bits. And the detailed guide is where you see the tricky bits laid out. Like, dear reader, you might have some information, here, right? Equivalent of the present participle, blah, 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 blah. But you know what? I actually want to know a little bit more, right, over here. And it's only here that you get the translation, because we want that to be last. So just an example. So that was the first bit of poetry we did, the first piece of prose that we did. And this was like a cast of thousands. It was hilarious. And like we were all working on it. But I just showed this to you because this has a really, Damien McManus, just an absolute hero. He gave so much information for the detailed guide. He's like, no, people should know about this too. People should know about this. Brendan, do you get this? I'm like, oh. He's like, okay, let me explain it. So it's really amazing. But you can go straight to the glossary, if you're just reading something else, right? Because again, the idea is to get more people reading, is you can go straight to the glossary yourself. And obviously you just go by letter and it's da-da-da-da. All right. And so you can go, so let's go back down to our friend egg. It's in there. And you might wonder, like, why don't we have definitions? Because again, as I said, we really wanted to highlight the work that has been done by publishers over the year. years. So we wanted to highlight those publishers and the works that they've done. So the way in which they're laid out is by the title of the book. And so you can look at one particular one, you can look at them all, right? But the thing about it, you'll see that they have different formats, is because we wanted to keep the formats original from the books in which they're published, right? So again, this is to really honor the work that's been done and also to reproduce it as sort of truthfully as we can. But we, a couple of years ago, met with our friends at eadar-lìon, and now you can search there too. Anyway, so that's the glossary. And you may wonder what we do. Maybe you don't. I'll mention it all the same. You might wonder what we do. I found an example of this morning. So say you come to something like, it's compound, and we don't have any listing in any published book, any published glossary, right? So compound words happens all the time. So what do? We call that that actually has one, oddly enough, but it didn't. So what we do is we just say it is a compound of these two things, and then you can go to the things and see them. All right. You can go to the grammar as well. And I should say the glossary is by leaps and bounds the most highly used part of the site. And we're continuing to add, except the reality of the situation is that like Emmett OCRs it, sends it to me, I clean it and enter it. So like I do it over coffee, so it goes slowly. All right. You can go to the grammar, and so you can get things like, information about cases and the like. You can get, I don't know, just take a look. Nice blocks of paradigms, because who doesn't like a paradigm? All right, so that's kind of the basics. And then we decided we were really interested in not only having people read text in transcription, in the original, but also to do manuscripts. And in part, if you think about the beauty that is Irish script on screen, there are all these images and materials out there. Let's get more people to read them, right? So this is so there's a primer, and then there's a quiz. So the primer, right? It starts out, and what we try to do is to link the examples that we use to actual texts that are on the site. So again, trying to keep these things internally connected, right? So, both of these, Kishina and Hishnig, are both on the site. So the quiz, there are 5 levels, so we can start out, you see? I suppose this one should. Oh, wait, that's not what I want to do. That's the quiz. You don't want to do that yet. Yeah. All right, so let's start with the primer. So anyway, the primer, just gets you going. And this is Christina Cleary's work, who did really amazing stuff. And, but immediately just start you out, what are the different forms of the letters? Right? And then take you all the way down to things like suspension strokes. And then you may as well go to the quiz, because as Abby said, it's a lot of fun. And this is really the work of Tom Lee, right? Any brave souls? What is it? I have a finger at the keyboard.
FAD, isn't it? FAD, and then what's the dot for this?
I don't know. Anybody? Well, let's just go with what we got.
So it's just.
All right. Anybody? All right.
Agus sometimes.
Okay, well, I'm gonna do something wrong so we can see. Incorrect. Yeah. So I, subscript, I and an L. All right. So yeah, good fun. And all right, so we'll stop there. So that is that's a work, of all those people there. Deirdre and Emmett spent a ton of time, and I spent some time too, sort of cutting out pieces, like little screenshots and putting them all together. So when you go to here, books means books from which we drew material. And again, we want you to be able to go directly to the site to buy it, because we want to support that work, and it's an ongoing work. And people here is different than people over here. People here is folks who have done, since we saw Eleanor Knott, let's go to Eleanor Knott. Eleanor is responsible, of this book that has been used, but we also pair with anim.ie, so you can get more information about those kinds of folks. who are playing a part. Resources, these are just other places, that you can get information about Irish stuff, but we should put in other things, especially related to Gaelic and contact. Oh, I've never seen that before. Oh, there we go. Yeah, and it just goes to me. So, all right. So with that said, I'm going to go back and finish things up. And I think this is our, how are we doing on time? I'm going to try to finish. All right. So that's a site tour. Now, if you're on the site and you start to get a little bit confused, we did a walkthrough, and this is voiced over by Deirdre and Emmett, which is great. And I wanted them to have their pictures on it, but they demurred. So I, however, did not. And this is, I did an interview, and I had just come back, this is me sitting at our kitchen table, and I had just come back from a run, and I'd forgotten that there was this interview. I had no idea they were going to post it, so the lighting is terrible. A friend of mine says, "You're a master of shadows." So I'm just apologizing, but that's like the background and me in running gear. And much more professional is our friend Brooke Fody-Gemmell interviewing Tom Lee and Christina Cleary about the paleography. So that's a really great little video. And in terms of paleography, just having talked, so I just spent part of the morning downstairs here in Eadar-lìon, and it's just a reminder that the distinction between sort of paleography and print is not, it's not one of manuscript and print, of course, but just to remind ourselves that learning paleography is actually really helpful for reading the printed word. And so this is the Old Testament by Bidh, and I'm so excited by this. So anyway, so this is great. This is great fun, and Lord knows, I've been doing. And really, Patter and I have been doing a paleography workshop at Edinburgh. And so we'll be using this because we're also doing a Bible reading group with Christopher Lewin. So they don't know it yet, but we're going to be using that. All right. So we do collaborations, and we've collaborated. So if you recall, when I called up the text site, it said prose and poetry and McMorris. McMorris is this really wonderful project that's run at Maynooth under the direction of Patricia Palmer, and it is mapping cultural actors for Ireland in the early modern period. And we connected with them, right? So you can see here, we've connected with them to publish, again, excerpts of some of the Irish language texts that they have highlighted. So that's a really great partnership. As you know, we collaborate with ùidh, and so again, you can go from a text over to the glossary, our glossary, and there's ùidh. We are collaborating with some folks at Gluckman Ireland House at New York University to do a lay for Shangaige, or Youngaige. Yeah, I think it is. Well, it's Middle Irish, but Middle and Old. And Deborah Hayden's amazing LICE program on medical learning. So we are really interested in the ecosystem. Again, this is back to sort of Abby's point about thinking about Gaelic, and Gaelic in the early modern period, and how it can be useful to sort of think across these kind of more modern divisions. So hopefully those will be of interest to people. There are pieces in the pipeline. Sam and Dylan from Harvard are working on a poem. We just need to sort of help them out. Phil, who just recently started at Limerick as an assistant professor, he is the person really behind the McMorris poems. Greg Darwin and Felix Levin are working on a piece from Keating, and Patter and myself are working on early modern letter. And just so you don't think I'm lying, here they are as proof of progress. And so this is one Patter and I are working on, Sam and Dylan, and so on. All right, so those will be up, so please keep an eye on the site. They'll pop up. All right, so third, I think we're doing okay for time. So one of the things we're working on is an interactive grammar game. The grammar is, shall we say, not without its challenges. And again, like the paleography, we want it to be linked to the text and the grammar that is on the site itself. This is done in collaboration with Greenhouse Studios, which is the digital humanities lab at UConn. And the following slides were created by someone by the name of Emmett Barra. So we'll have nouns, and these are, and Emmett made all these slides, so thanks to him. So the nouns are based on Irish, so IGT2, and so this is just a picture of something from IGT2. The noun and the IGT, the Irish grammatical tracks they're not the easiest to use. As Emmett puts it, there's a high barrier to entry. And so the idea is to give digitization examples from each entry. So, right, so there's a head entry and then other words that, function similarly. So for example, the word for year, blean, bleathen. All right, and so you can actually see it laid out like this. But you can also play around with it. And so get tested. So give the accusative plural. You don't feel confident. I don't know. So I'm going to go to the glossary. I'm going to look around. I think I've got my quarry. I can go back. I can type it in. I can check it, and I'm correct. I'm feeling strong and brave. Dative plurals. We all know how those end. Those are nice and easy, so we'll check it. Correct. Right. So you can do this on and on. Right. We're doing the same with verbs. And Tom Lee, whom you saw before with the paleography video, has been working, and this is very much Emmett and Deirdre, bits of me, working on this. And Tom Lee put together something called the conjugator. Right? And so we'll be working on, or we have been working on regular verbs, but there are also ability to add sort of custom entries, put things in, or adding irregular verbs. Why are we doing this? Again, it's a complicated system, and this is based on, the information here is based on IGT3, right? So Irish Grammatical Tracks 3. So you can use a conjugator. So select a verb, right? And so Emmett chose that one, Klanov. And so you can get all the paradigms you need, right? All right. So, and nicely shaded so you can see that this, so you don't get overwhelmed by the responses. And so you see there are 4 regular forms: 1 syllable, broad and slender, and 2 syllable, right? And now we're into our irregulars, right? And the like. Okay, we'll move on for now. I think you get the point. And here you can practice, though, also conjugation. So here, you're just given randomly, right? Figure out this form of the verb. Are you correct? And I'm going to let this one run out because it's so funny. Look at that. Could be more than one right answer. Come on, Emmett. That's out. I was thinking about that one. Come on, you can do it. Sorry, that was a lot of waiting for not much. So anyway, so you can go ahead and do this. But this is the other one, right? So you can do different kinds of verb practice, right? So conjugation to parameters. So what does that mean? So identify the correct verb form, right? So this is the sort of fridge magnet version of this, right? So those of you who are familiar with Duolingo and those kinds of things, this is a fairly regular approach to this kind of work. And anyway, we're not doing all that, but we are gonna hopefully get to the end, so where you can see how Emmett has done. All right. Well, anyway, there's a little bit at the end that pops up like your percentage, right? And so, and it has a cute little picture of lambs, which Tom Lee just decided was the kind of thing that people needed to see after they had just done a bunch of the modern Irish conjugating. All right, so in just to finish up, a couple minutes, the last benefits and challenges of the digital. I think there are lots of things that are good. One is that it's a nice way for early career publication, right? So to allow people who are working on something to get something out in the world fairly early. And this is Kieran Nuadh-aimsireil, the amazing Kieran Nuadh-aimsireil, who's just finished her PhD work with Owen McCord at Trinity Dublin. And so here you can see some of her work. And you can, if this were the live site, you could go and you could learn a little bit more about Kieran, which you should, because she's great. And this goes on. So even though this is a collaborative project, this is something that someone can cite. This is in their CV. This is their own. So you're in collaboration first, but it still recognizes individual work and originality. Secondly, another thing which is sort of interesting is that we've been doing these kind of collaborative workshops. So this is the first one we've had gone live, and we've done another one which we need to finish. I'm fully responsible for this, but we brought people together over the summer through the Celtic Studies Association of North America and gave them something to read, and we ran a course for like 2 weeks, and so people worked on it, and then we used in many ways the questions that came out of that experience to build a detailed guide for this. And then me and Emmett and Deirdre and Greg Darwin each took a section and build it out. And so you can get the detail, but everybody, it's like credited to the Kasana workshop, right? So this is collaboration going forward. So what are some of the benefits of the digital approach, though, just generally? So those are kind of specific things that I just showed for matters. One, it's open access, right? Well, at least in our case, not all digital things are open access, but we also make it free. And here, back to this question about learning, I mean, I suppose any learning, if you're outside of class, can be self-paced, but this is nice because it's self-paced, but it's not directed in the way that a book is. You can move back and, you can move around as you wish. Things are easily updatable, correctable, and sadly that occurs. And like I have people who have worked on pieces and they come back to me like, actually, Brendan, can you change this and just go back into the JavaScript and then change it? Right, so it's nice and easy. It is in obvious ways, although we can talk about it, it's community building. And that's not only scholars, but also students, and that's students at the postgrad and the undergrad level. But we are also interested in building the community more broadly, people who are not students, academics in an institution at all. You can help fill some of the institutional void. What I mean by that is that through the digital and this kind of project, you can do some things that you might expect or hope that your institution would support, but for whatever reason, money, decisions administrators, competition for other projects, you can't get support. So it can do that. And obviously, it is a kind of, you're not waiting on a publisher. We can publish whenever we and the authors are ready, the particular pieces. So some of the challenges, maintenance and sustainability, I mean, down to simple things, just like losing your domain name if you don't keep an eye on it, right? And all of a sudden, it's ransomed. But making sure it's updated and is a pain. And, as I've joked before, it's like, look, you write a book and it's done, it's out in the world, right? Right. If you do a project like this, it lives with you, right? So it's another child. You have to check in on it. How's it doing? Is it doing okay? How is it out there in the world? Credit in a collaborative project. How do you give credit to people? So we spend a lot of time thinking about that. And I've given you an example of Kira's piece, right? It's like, yeah, we helped, and and Deirdre and Emmett and I read every single piece, like word by word, and we talk to the authors and this and that. But we're kind of we're up there a lot, so we don't need to be there all the time. And the people who have done the work get the credit, right? So, yeah. Scholarly status. The scholarly status of a website is just not as high as a book. Like, this has taken vastly more time out of my life than anything I've ever written or I ever will read. I think it's vastly more important. It has vastly greater impact, and I think it's kind of more interesting. But it doesn't have quite the same. Right? So how do you deal with that? And what are the kinds of decisions you make? Funding, this funding startup for doing digital work, right? How do you get that money? Money's getting harder to find. But even worse is funding. As we know, funding agencies will give money to start things up. But once you've started something and you want to do the next thing, they don't care. It's all about what's new and exciting. So what do you do when you have, your project is at its like, awkward tween age and you want to sort of develop it and you can't get any funding? Pace of production can be super fast, but it can also be really slow. And I often am the bottleneck, right? Like I'm doing the JavaScript in the background, right? I'm just filling it in. I didn't write the code, but I have other things going on, and my wife is in the room, and so as a reminder that there are other things happening in the world, and I can't do this all the time. So 4 concluding thoughts, and these are just kind of things to sort of talk about. Maybe, this is both a pro and a con. I worry that there might be an increased dependence on such institutional projects for the kind of, education broadly construed that we provide in, say, Celtic languages, but in other things, because of the lack of institutional support in a variety of ways. And does that put us down the path toward, a situation in which we're drawing more and more on or uncompensated volunteer labor? So I think that's something. And one thing I say, everybody who does a piece for life, we pay. I mean, it's not like a huge sum, but it's basically an honorarium, because too often people are asked to give their work for free. We don't want to do that. I'm American. I work and live in North America, and the situation for Celtic languages is dire. It's really, really bad. And other fields are like this too. But is there going to be increasingly a burden on specialty societies, things like Celtic Studies Association, to carry the burden? But in a sort of more helpful way, one of the nice things about doing this is that it's also led a number of people to decide that they should be not only reading this stuff, but discussing it in the modern form of the language. So an all English conference, and the very, very wonderful Tudor Stuart Ireland conference, a number of us now for 3 years running have had a panel or 2 panels in Irish. As a last thing, I think there's also something to be done here with this project and thinking about other minoritized languages, right? And so in Connecticut, we have 2 sovereign nations, and we've done a couple of workshops on early modern Irish and Southern New England Algonquin, right, with members in the Mohegan Pequot. And then obviously, I think to bring it all back around, I think it's a nice way to really be like one more ally in that work to bring, Gaelic and Gaelic together. And I just gave the example of these classes where you can learn Gàidhlig Thràth Nuadh-aimsireil, which I did this summer and for which I'm quite grateful. And those are our partners, and I'll stop.
Thanks, Brendan. Míle thank Brendan son òraid cho-obrachail, farsing landóchis.
Yeah, I shouldn't have wrote.
But I think it's really important to bring that level of awareness of opportunities and the things that stand to be gained. It's very easy in the current climate to become despondent about about the future and about passing on skills and about developing within and beyond our own disciplines and sub-disciplines. And I think this is a really wonderful example of crossing all sorts of boundaries in all sorts of places, but extending hands of friendship in directions which really end up being very productive.
Yeah, thanks so much.
So I'm sure there will be questions and points. eadar-lìon, I'll try and set this so that I can see you all, but it's quite difficult for me to know if you're wanting to wave your hand. So if you could use the hand in the bottom of the Zoom window to say that you'd like to ask a question, or just put it in chat, and then I'll know to call on you.
And I'm always more than happy if people want to contact me directly.
Sure.
I got a million market. It was Very interesting. I'm definitely going to use it. I use some for one of the class, which is about the history of Gaelic
Oh, great.
language and culture. I like the students to have access to the text, but obviously they can't read early modern Gaelic, so I translated to modern Gaelic for them to use in class.
That's great.
And obviously, this is a great resource rather than having to go through archaic editions and so on. One question, it's a very ambitious project. Are you planning to mediate it through Irish and potentially Scottish Gaelic at some point? Because the website is in English, obviously.
Yeah, in fact, we had it arranged that somebody was going to do it and I had the money to pay them, and the answer is yes.
Okay.
And we just need to make it happen. And it's interesting because like McMorris is you can flip back and forth between, Irish and English. And it's vastly more text heavy than ours. And anyway, it was just interesting. I was just surprised. There's actually not a lot of descriptive text in ours. It's relatively straight ahead. Now, that descriptive text should be bilingual. So yeah, the answer is yes, we just need to do it.
But yeah, I was just going to comment again how useful this is going to be. I think particularly the module that I teach every second year in the history of the written language, the ISOS that you referred to has been a real boon to that module.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And it's a model of how well things can be done as well. I think it's been extremely helpful, I think, for students. And this, we do a little bit of as we call it, Gaelic Chlasaigeach is the term we use for it, particularly looking at Carswell, the first printed book. And exactly the point you were making about the distinction between manuscript and print is somewhat artificial at this stage.
Yeah, it is, right.
And that slide that you showed, we look at that, but to make it easy for students, we look at a later edition where the print is clearer for most of it. So I can see this being very useful, particularly for that module, and just loads of rabbit holes for students to disappear down.
Well, I'm delighted to hear it, and you should let me know what some of those rabbit holes look like. And if you ever decide that the class might want to, or like a class or like a graduate class might ever want to work on a project, we'd be happy to do that. It is, we run on a shoestring with very few people doing it, but we keep at it, and always happy to have people come in and help out.
Can I ask a little bit more about what
no, go ahead.
Yeah.
I just
your experience of how it works pedagogically with classes, because it seems such a good model to have the expert and the learner voice in the creation of it. And I love the way that you've shaped the kinds of questions that people might want to ask. But as you're going through all the different kind of ways of engaging with the glossary and the grammatical material, it reminded me of the very first session I had as a first year undergraduate, where we were invited into the department, and Michael Lappage glared at us very hard and said, "You are going to be sitting up till 2 a.m. turning over pages in your glossaries until your fingers bleed." And that was our introduction to what was ahead of us. And actually the structure of the way you've approached it in a way shortcuts some of that. How does that end up in, how do you get past people using it as a crutch and into them using it as a way to learn?
Yeah. Well, the honest answer is I'm not sure, because I don't use it in the classroom because I don't have the opportunity to do it, right? I know other people do. So for instance, I went into McCarthy's class once at Trinity just to walk with the students, and they use it. And Duncan Snedden at Edinburgh was just saying that he's used the paleography for his class on paleography. And I think, two quick responses. One thing, and into the earlier question as well, would actually be really interesting for us to hear from a class. We had a really difficult part on this. In this text that you have broken down, there's nothing in the detailed guide about this, but we had a real problem with it. And we could add something. And I think that kind of interactive, and we can, you can easily write in, thanks to the students of is one thing. And I think sort of down the road, what it would be really interesting is to see The idea was that people would start to sort of construct an understanding of the language by just going word by word, you know. And I think if I were teaching this in a class, what I would do is I would take selections, and it's a poem and there are 4 quatrains, I'd give them the 5th. Right? You know, it's a story of Keating up to lines 220, I'd give them 221 to 240. It's like, all right, go for it. You know, it's just an idea.
Yeah. You, Neil, and then we'll get Neil, and then there's some people online. So
Okay. First of all, apologies for being slightly late. I hope that wasn't disruptive in any sense. I mean, that's just amazing. I can really understand how it works. And like Abby said, I love the model of the learner and the expert being involved in it. But my question is, goes back to one of your points. You were talking about, as it were, the status of this form in the academic world as compared with a more traditional form, books, or academic articles, whatever. And I suppose my question is, it's obvious that there's a huge amount of scholarly work goes into something like this on an ongoing basis. Do you see any sense in which the way in which this kind of work is perceived by the academic world changing? Or is it just really, is it a really big hurdle to get that kind of appropriate academic recognition?
Yeah, so the bar is open tonight. I understand over here, we could all come and talk about this question. It's a huge question. And so I'm going to give a really brief answer. I think that in spite of the predictions and the hopeful words that there was going to be an expanded range of acceptable scholarly outputs in the world, right? And we, you know, and I'm an historian, we'd be moving away from the monograph. It has, in fact, not happened. And so this, I mean, the other thing too about this is like, yes, it's helpful and but so much of this is about thinking about architecture and structure of how such a thing works. And also in many ways, it's it plays in a meta level, thinking about what's the effect of the presence of something like this, and there could be all kinds of other things, you know, in other fields. But what is the effect of something like this on the field, right? It's a field intervention question, basically, right? You know, which I hope to write about at some point. But I mean, 2 things, like this has been, I mean, my career is lovely. I'm like, all's well and good, but I would have been advised if ambitious sounds like a bad, you know, if I were more sort of careerist about it, maybe. I mean, I think most academics you have to be kind of careerist ambitious. So I'm not saying I don't have sort of careerism and sort of ambition. One must to some extent, but it was an unwise choice to do this.
Yeah.
Right. And it has come back to bite me on a number of occasions. But on the other hand, it's also a sign that if people who have tenure don't spend time doing things outside of the monograph or whatever, we can never expect graduate students and junior faculty to do it. So, yeah.
Interesting. I mean, just to one sentence coming back, I mean, Abby, you want to do more? I think I was thinking very much along your lines that the academic world is inherently conservative with a small c in terms of how it looks at its outputs and its public face. That's the difficulty.
Yeah, no, it has come back directly to me and said, "Oh, you shouldn't have spent your time doing that. You should have just finished the second monograph." And, yeah, maybe I should have, but this vastly more interesting. You know, and I'll write the second monograph or whatever it is. It's gonna be fine, but you know, it's cost me some things, and not every, you know, does everybody want to do that? Do you always want to do that? Anyway.
And there's that additional vulnerability as well because of what happens if it goes wrong and it goes down. And that you know, we've seen really wonderful projects funded in the UK that weren't funded to keep going because
That's
exactly the thing that
that's
sustainability, you know, and then the really groundbreaking work that happened as part of them is as if it had never been.
Well, Pat Palmer said one of the nicest things I've ever heard about this project. She said, you know, the thing is, you guys are kind of an anchor. You've been there for 10 years and you just keep going.
Yeah.
And the thing is, trust us, like we tried to get big money and nobody would give it to us. Like it was legible, but not legible enough. And so I have a research account, and that's how I've paid all of the honorarium. Right. So I just paid out of that. But that's now been slashed, so we don't know what we're gonna do. Anyway, sorry, the questions.
Yeah, people online, Silmeth, I don't know if I'm saying that right, or if there's a full name, but proper techie question about the grammar elements and so on. Would you like to come and ask your question in person, or would you prefer me to read it out? No. Don't know, right?
I can ask
you're
it
there.
myself.
Yeah.
Sorry. So my full name's Benedikt Jaworski. I'm a self-learning Irish speaker who knows some Scottish Gaelic too, and I'm trying to learn classical Gaelic. So I've been reading Start na Gaelic and grammar introductions to stories from Keating, etc. And the quiz part for the grammar sounds great. It'd be very nice to be able to test your knowledge that way, but still the grammar part of the website doesn't look, well, it looks like the weakest point of currently. There is not a lot regarding the syntax, and parts for the prepositions don't have translation, or sometimes they don't have information about the use with a definite article, etc. So my question is, do you plan to expand the text of the grammar section?
I think I hear a volunteer.
Listen, you're absolutely, there has to be a weakest part of everything.
And that you have absolutely, homed in on that.
I don't want to sound too negative. I do appreciate the website and I use it currently.
You don't sound negative at all, and I think this is exactly the kind of feedback that we want. Yeah, it is by distance the least developed and the weakest, and it's not unproblematic, right? There are a couple of things where we need to revisit that we're not so happy with, and that is something. So we're looking for money to do two things, right? To launch the grammar game and clean up and make better that part, because it's really important, and it is. And again, I don't take it as a negative or like a bad criticism. It's insightful and 100% correct. So yes, we're going to try to work on it. Or we will work on it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Kate, vil heen som hashtagget Gàidhlig Thràth Nuadh-aimsireil.
Oh, actually, no, I'm just very impressed by the way that everything was just very connected. In a way, that's just what I wrote in the chat. Just in a way that you would usually have to go elsewhere to find somebody's publication on something, and it's particularly good that you're crediting everyone on the team fully their links to their biographies. So I'm sitting here trying to think of a question, but I might get in touch afterwards with such a thing. No, it's very impressed. Yeah.
Thanks, Kate. And by the way, speaking of impressed, my wife and I saw the talk that you did at the National Library the other week, which was fantastic. So, thank you.
No, thank you. No, thank you. I'm trying to remember if I saw you there. There was lots of people at the end, wasn't there?
No, we didn't cold call you at a but anyway, thank you so much.
Mahi, agus Cúfán. Listen, I'll read your question out. Okay, says Mohesa Voshta Vrendain Vishe Kahintochafad. Has any work been done to integrate sound files, or is that at all realistic? Obviously, there's no contemporary recordings, but it would be interesting when reading certain poems to listen along to educated approximations of pronunciation to bring out how the language has and has not changed.
Yeah, so it's from the very beginning we planned on this, and again, this is sort of back to Selma's question. There are only so many shoulders to the wheel, And but we will do it, and I think primarily for the poetry, that's really the key. So you can hear this. And a friend of mine and I did a museum exhibition at the Folger Shakespeare Library. It's so funny, I'm looking, I don't even know where I'm looking to it. But
They're up there.
Paul Pog Branagh from Dias, he did sound files for a number of poems that were, we showed manuscripts and transcriptions of, and he read them. And we tried to sort of get those, but they were done, the quality of them was really bad because they were done over the phone a number of years ago. But we'll just sit down with people. And ideally, we'd like to get the people who did the work to read them if they're comfortable to do it. But yeah, absolutely, 100% we plan on doing it. Yeah.
Right. And yeah, Simith, sorry, I've forgotten your proper name already, but that is definitely an offer, a volunteer offer. He's been writing his own online notes on classical Gaelic grammar. So
on fair. Yeah. Listen, it takes. I mean, it takes a lot. Oh, I think you may have written. Did you write to me at some point? Did you write to the telling us that we had dogged something? Yeah, just write to me directly. And I mean, because one of the things that's really nice about the site is there are people with very different trainings. I trained with an English historian of the Reformation, in grad school, and sort of pieces things together. Wes Hamrick did, literature, 18th century literature. Emmett and Deirdre, are Celticists, but mostly like literature and history, Pather is a linguist, so there are lots and lots of different people. And so some things that just go over my head, or somebody else's head are picked up by somebody else. And you very well may be one of those people to help sort of paper, not like paper over cracks, right? It's to fill holes and make sure things are good. So be in touch. Yeah. No, exactly. We need people like you to point it out.
So
we're over time.
No, we're not out of time because before you're allowed to go away.
Oh, well, I'm just saying.
No, you have to tell us what are we going to do about this wonderful collection of manuscripts that fall into your scope in terms of period, which live in the National Library of Scotland or elsewhere, which were used by Gaelic speakers here, that are sort of hovered around about because they're nearly all of Irish provenance, and that we need to try and find some way of opening up to broader audiences and find ways to make them work for Scottish Gaelic studies and reintegrate them into broader Gaelic and Irish studies. And we've a job to do. And this looks like it might be one of the things that we need to think about as we try and find ways to do that job.
I mean, one of the things that at least immediately kind of comes to mind, and this may not be of any, but it's just something that immediately comes. Like one of the things that Patter and I are really interested in doing is, that we are doing right now, is we're trying to link two parts of the site, right, which are text breakdowns and paleography, because we're moving from something that only exists in manuscript, right? So we're working on a letter, and it's also nice because, as you were saying, like classical Gaelic. This is why we call it early modern Irish, right? Because it's broader than classical. But for all of the texts that we use, there's some, for most of them, right? I think Kira's may be well, no, I think there's even a transcription of that because of the Bardic miscellany, right? But the one that Patter and I are working on is going straight from manuscript to lave. And so the idea is to try to link those two, right? Those sites. And I think what we could do is, so this is the site that's dedicated to a partnership, right? So general poetry, general prose, link partnership with another project. We could do it right here. Other people would be doing other things, right, in such a project. But I imagine one of the things we could do is help, introduce people, whether there's a kind of ISASI element to it, there's a kind of publication.
The National Library manuscripts are nice.
Oh,
They're
right.
they're there and they're ready and waiting, and a lot of it is transcribed. I was thinking of the absolutely sort of core work that Professor McKinnon did, transcribing those manuscripts in the Celtic Review and elsewhere, and some of those have been subsequently edited or fed into scholarly editions that are also drawing on Irish manuscripts. So there's lots of core work done. It's a question of picking appropriate and interesting bits to.
Because we could do a dedicated section of, like these manuscripts that you may not think of if you're like me, you're coming from Irish history or something like that, or and if you're working in Gaelic in Scotland, you might not go to this site, and that could be like a bridging piece, and you could have National Library of Scotland, like classical Gaelic text produced in Scotland, and here's we write a little, like, so even here, right? There's a description of the partnership. You could imagine doing that, and then some of us could work on some text and over here, and then it could just a way to sort of bring it to an Irish-oriented audience and make that Irish-oriented audience aware of those texts and the connections. So one of the, and sorry, Ian, and this is this is a matter of embarrassment. I mean, there are many things of embarrassment related to this project. Like threads that haven't been entirely pulled, things that haven't been finished up. But one of the things that we did, so we did a launch conference, and we're going to do a 2017 10-year anniversary conference. So if anybody wants to come to New England, we'll try to figure that out. We had this great digital, it's a digital humanities thing, where people do, a friend of ours was involved in this, writing like a program in one day, like, and you bring people together and you work it out. And so we said, you know what, we're going to do that. We're going to do text breakdown in one day, right? And so we picked, and Wilson actually picked it, right? And so it's a piece that's from Scotland, but written in the common language. And it's a croissantach, right? So it's pròiseact piece. And so we divvied, and we wrote to people like, are you coming to the conference? Yes. Would you like to be involved in this project? Yes. And we're like, you get quatrain 1, you get quatrain 2, you get the first 3 lines of, the prose, you get, and so on and so forth. And people showed up at various stages like, oh, I forgot to do it, or I intensely did this. And so actually one of the very first pieces we ever started working on, I think kind of fits that sort of bridging description. And so so Wilson and I talk about it on occasion, and then I talk about with, Anuas, who's involved from Glasgow, and various other people who were involved in that particular project, were like, we got to come back to that. So we'll come back to it. But it would be a great thing. I don't know if it's just the answer that comes to mind immediately.
We need a venue and an excuse.
Yeah, we could do that. Sorry, Ian.
Ian, Dilly.
As má taic cén ríiste bhréanann, a mid oscail cumala dálaí a chuid Gaelic an den éidean. Agus loch nach buringen G seaching a gal a bhéil ferst an áireacht das colascar a ionnsachadh má. The question before Abby said what she said, I was just going to ask a question about the Scottish material, and maybe you're not the man to answer it, maybe Abby or somebody else around the table know just exactly how much material is there in Scotland that we know about? How long's a bit of string?
1600, your cut-off date?
Oh, no. Our cutoff date is really about, I mean, we say 1650, but it's really probably around 1700.
Loads.
And loads, you had a technical term, and Pat and I, like another section, we're thinking potentially correspondence, so we'll start with some correspondence. Sounds like a lot.
But I mean, thousands of pages.
Yeah, it's a lot.
But you don't need all of it.
No. I think the taster, like all these are tasters, they're super intense, and the work that goes into doing it is really. And I remember, I know one of the people who continues to work on this and worked on this said, well, what's really great about this is that it forces us to do the thing we never do. I'm like, well, what's that? And it says commit to a description of what the thing is in front of us, because you can get the translation right, and that's a relatively elastic exercise, but explaining it, there's not really. Even if you publish, a bardic poem, say in a specialist journal, in the notes, but again, you don't have notes for everything. This is for everything. What's it doing? And so people have said that the process has been really fun because it's like a re-education for them. And anyway, but nevertheless, when you see it, it's the taster, right? Because again, like back to this question of how would you use it pedagogically? We've only done 4 quatrains. Now you do the 5th student, but you could have some intense dives into some of these texts, a description of this is just an insight into so much of this other material, and start thinking about the connections, but also how does the connection become a disconnection over time, which I think is an interesting. I think it's a very interesting, just kind of intellectual question.
Just picking up on Ian's question, as Abby has indicated, ISOS has a lot of material from the National Library of Scotland available. One thing that could usefully go here, I think, is Carswell's Film na Nordi. Again, it is digitised by Edinburgh University Library, their copy, but try and find it. You have to think round corners to locate it. It's very hard to search for. Just the way they've done it, but it's there, and a link to this will make it so much more accessible.
I have to say, I would love to do that piece. I'd love to do that piece. And as I was looking at Beadle's Bible this morning, and thinking, we don't have anything from the Old or New Testament, and we have to. It's ludicrous, like not to do that, but. So much of that depends just upon the interests of the particular people, right? But yes, if we could start moving on that, like soon, that would be wonderful.
It just needs an agreement and a link, and
and so generally, and sorry, now we're into the weeds, but we tend to pick for prose no more than 250 words, 300 words, something like that, because it doesn't sound like a lot. And then you're doing every single one, and you're arguing. You're like, wait, hold on a second. But wait, no, there's this. Is that this? Do we want to call it that? And we've actually written a style sheet. But this is what I actually think this is one of the things which is really lovely about it. There's a style sheet, so there's similarity across entries. But like if you're doing it, you're going to have different voice than right? And so people will take slightly different takes on how they describe things, right? Which is really lovely. So you see a little bit of the personality of the person in it. So anyway, we need to find those personalities to do those 250 words.
But can you not grab scholars who are just about to put out a new edition of
Absolutely.
And then you say, right, here, this is going to be an advert for you. Think about Willie Gillis with the books of Clanranald when that comes up. Give us 250 words.
Yeah.
And they can do that right away.
Yeah.
And with the press to go to Amazon button as well and finding something. It's a really good
It's time for Flidlish, which is just coming out. Like if you could
you could just have the advert
using
drop
the Edinburgh manuscripts.
I should answer. So and no, absolutely. So like Kira's is finishing her PhD, and that's a piece from it. And like Deirdre did a piece from Bidh and that's just coming out. Like I think the launch is like next week or something like that.
Right. So
yeah.
like Amazon, you can read a section.
Yeah, exactly. This is your little intro. This is your little taster, and it's nice and like, oh wow, that was really interesting. Oh, I can get a version of that. I can get the full thing, and so no, absolutely. And it's funny though because, and I think in a case like Kira or Deirdre, it's relatively easy because they were doing that super intense, linguistic work. And Rory would be doing that as well, and so I have to get on to Rory. But no, that's it. But what I hadn't thought about too is, for those like depending on where things are coming out, like a commercially available, it would be interesting actually to connect to publishers, right, and say to get a little bit.
Charge the
all right, see now, yeah. See, you're better at this than I am. But you can imagine, like, if you're launching, it's like, get a little bit of a taster of this, go here, and you can see a little bit of the work that, Deirdre's done, Willem's done, or Rory has done, so you can kind of bounce back and forth.
Yeah, but the beautiful thing is as well that you actually get the sense of a community of scholars working in this, young and old.
Yeah.
And it's not just, the great figures of the past who, like Moses came down from
right.
The tablets of stone, the LPS volumes.
No, thanks. Yeah, thanks to that. It is really nice, and it's also sort of humbling and humble and a kind of beautiful, because you have people who really know one thing and they don't know the other thing. Right. And like for me, it has been the most intense educational experience over like 10 years. Because again, I speak modern Irish, but I'm trained as an historian in an English-speaking institution. And I think, when I was doing my PhD, I think there were 4 of us who had Irish. And anyway, so you meet these people and you're like, oh, I thought it was this. And like, no, it's not that. And then, but other people will know about publication history, or they'll know about the Reformation, or they'll know about, high politics and political thought, and you start to run these things together. So it has a kind of, in the most positive way, I think, a kind of leveling quality to it that allows it to be sort of greater than some of the parts in certain ways, right? Which is not to downplay anybody's individual work, which is amazing.
Meg's got some thoughts about orthographies and things that would turn up if we started having more. Meg, do you want to take a shot?
And again, obviously, if anybody needs to leave, like I'm happy, like I got nowhere to be, so.
Meg, take a shot. Are you on mute? No, how has it? Actually not.
Thank you. I enjoyed that very much, and I'm sorry that I came in late. And I was just thinking, when I was learning Early Modern Gaelic with Colm Boyle in Aberdeen, he would say there isn't any regular grammar. So it's very nice to see you generating correct answers on rules. I suppose it's that there were so many alternatives to do with metrical needs. I just put down 3 observations, but they're not really questions. One was to Ian's question about what sort of material there is in Edinburgh, and I think the majority of it is medical, and a lot of it derivative. As with the scholastic method, they were always quoting Galen and Hippocrates and Dioscorides, and not that often using native material or new material. And I was also thinking, I did my undergraduate thesis on medical material. It was manuscript 7213, I remember that, and it was one of the most decorated manuscripts. There was a lot of red added, red dots, lots of black dots. And I think in that manuscript there was also this wheel for working out the day of Easter. And I was thinking, these curious things that can get lost in manuscripts, it would be good. It would be good to gather these together.
You would expect, or this is peculiar, So the hope is to try to give people a bit more information about orthographic range. And we also hope to update, we always hoped, and we continue to hope, to update the paleography section so that you can see some of the more advanced kinds of things. I mean, there's at some level, there's nothing more advanced in manuscript, according to me, than a suspension stroke, because then you have to really know what's coming down the pike to understand what the ending would be. But as we all know, the scribal practice can be all over the shop. And so we want to highlight the ways in which people will, connect words, spell differently, link across lines, curiosities of representation, all these kinds of, curious ways to make, ligatures and compendia and all these kinds of good things. So hopefully in like the primer, and I've actually started collecting examples of things that I really wish I knew at some point. And I think back to your point, Abby, about, I can't remember who it is, you said be up till 2 a.m. and I just got no time for that stuff. I was like, you know what, you're here to do interesting, interpretive, intellectual work. This stuff's tough enough. Like, I mean, my master's advisor, whom I'm immensely grateful to and love, just sent me off to read the 1641 depositions when I was a master's student. So like, oh, just read these things. I was like, all right. And I had no idea what secretary had. I had there was no help, there was no guidance, there was not even, I just like looked at the calendar, I looked at the thing and kept a list. And if people don't need to do that, that's a waste of time.
Eleanor, are you still with us? I'm really sorry, I skipped over a point from you. Would you like to come and say it, or shall I read it out?
Sure. Well, thank you very much. That was really interesting. And I just wanted to, reacting to the point that this is really, digital projects are really difficult in terms of academic careers. It would be really wonderful if we could get a review for this of the project for the Studia Celtica Fenica. So if you find anyone to volunteer, we would be delighted to get the text. Yeah, thank you. Because these things need to be advertised in academic context as well, in traditional journals, etc. And these are in a way similar to the books, so I don't see why. And so that's important for us to get the electronic projects reviewed as well. Yeah, thanks, Elena. Good to see you. A review would be great. Just don't get Selma to do it yet. He's got to help us clean things up. No, seriously, it would be great to have a review. And there was another journalist doing a review of the. And it's funny, when you write a book, you have no choice whether it's going to be reviewed or not. Maybe it will, maybe it won't, right? And I think that's the way that it should be with, if somebody wants to review it, God bless, and we'll hope for the best. There's a danger to it too. Like if I write a bad book review, right? This review, I have problems, blah, 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 right? Another review might come out and it's good, this and that. But back to this comparison between a monograph or an edited collection and a website. Right? The book's out. I'm like, okay, well, you didn't like it. Sorry. I did. But negative reviews for a living, developing project can be really problematic, especially if you disagree with them, right? So if I'm looking for ongoing funding and say, Meg writes a review and says, this is terrible, don't go to this thing, they don't know anything about, this, that, or the other thing. It becomes, and I'm not, it just is what it is. And I think those of us who are in this line of work need to understand that it's not a one-to-one correspondence. Absolutely. Right? Scholarly output and a review. Scholarly output and a review. And then what happens to the ongoing scholarly development on the thing that is a developing, living, breathing project. And so I've spent having been a reviews editor in the past, and having sat on the executive board of the
NACBS, which does the Journal of British Studies, a big specialty journal. We spent a lot of time thinking about the responsibilities of reviewers for digital projects are not quite the same. And I've reviewed digital projects. Yeah. And so I think the reviewer, the person doing it, really needs to understand what some of the
implications, yeah, sure.
Yeah, what's at play. And I think, and I'm not saying you're saying this, but often what people say is like, we need people to understand this scholarly work like this other scholarly work, so we're going to write a review. Like, yeah, totally. Right, yeah. And yet there's a little bit more to it.
Of course, and on the other hand, once the book is published, it's already there in the form which will be, and the project is changing. So the review writer runs into the problem that some things that are stated will not be relevant anymore in a year's time, but nevertheless, I think it's important to make these projects visible, and this is one of the functions the review can do.
I just think that it's a really, really good point. But the other thing about it too is the person writing a review can have a positive effect on that development.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Right? They can do this more, which I've done. And again, I mean, I was just making a joke about someone who is absolutely dead on, right? As I said, there has to be a weakest part, and he is identified. Yeah, that's the part that needs the most work, and we're going to do it.
Yeah. And very good luck with the development of this exciting project.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Let you off the hook.
There is a hand there.
Oh, I think no, that's right. No, that's the mouse.
Yeah, I'm aware of the time. We're like over a half an hour over.
It's fine. It's the mouse. So you're okay.
Keep going, and we can miss a meeting at 3.
But it's in this room, so.
Oh, right. I'm running it.
Well, listen, like you all are so gracious. Thank you so much for taking the time. Thanks so much for your questions. Just email me if you have questions. If you don't hear from me, email again. And yeah, I mean, it sounds like we have some interesting possibilities for doing some things, and be great to keep doing that, build a network, but also, again, close those links. So thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Fabulous. Yeah. Fabulous. It's just exactly what we all need. But thank you so much for coming, and for coming in the summer. Agus Chlasaigeach Gaelic agus thanks for coming back and talking to us and being so patient and interesting and engaging with questions and thoughts
and absolute pleasure.
Things to do in the future.
Yeah, we'll keep the conversation going. Really, thanks again so much, everyone. Yeah.